a conversation with Peter and me about mostly non-art stuff. So this is 12/21/2019. It's around 10 a.m. Central Time here, and it's been 11 days since my beloved Oscar and Kiwi died. Jess and I are going to be going to look at a local Humane Society's animals. We might get a cat or two. Yeah, you can come in though. What?
You're recording?
Yeah.
I'm gonna come in. I'm in
Okay.
pajamas. Why?
Okay.
I thought you said you were gonna just talk. Why are you
No.
recording casual talk?
It's not cat. I didn't say it was. I said we were recording.
Oh.
My wife Jessica, who always listens to what I say, and so that's that regarding the cats. And then I did watch. Maybe we could just talk briefly here. I watched on Netflix. We don't have it, but I borrowed from my in-laws. So Netflix. I watched The Irishman. I thought it was too long and a rather pointless tale. It was well enough made, well enough acted, but Pacino is not good as Jimmy Hoffa. He was doing Pacino, and it just seemed like an old man movie. It wasn't as bad as the worst old man movies of Bergman or Fellini, but it was just there was really no point to it. The characters weren't compelling. The De Niro character wasn't compelling. The Joe Pesci character, was different than his over the top stuff with Scorsese before, but there just was no reason for it. What did you think?
I found all of the characters relatively pointless.
Yeah.
I thought that it was a vast come down from some of his better films. Even Casino, I mean, it's a pale imitation of things in Casino. I thought Pacino showed some promise in the early scenes and then became more and more cartoonish as the film went on. I thought De Niro had a couple good moments acting-wise, but nothing else really to show for it. I thought it was despite being ridiculously long, I thought it was incredibly predictable.
Yeah.
I knew what was going to happen at every given moment. And then there were scenes in it that were usually just homages to his greater films that were vastly inferior. And I do think that as far as being well made, it's well made in sort of like a journeyman way. There's nothing Scorsese in it. It looks very generic, a generic Netflix movie.
The opening where he's going down the hallway of the old folks' home to see the De Niro characters. Why are we doing that? There's no kinetic energy there. It's rather pointless. There's the scenes. There's the little side plot with the daughter played by Anna Paquin, who's revulsed she's revulsed by her father, which is good. But since we don't ever get to know anything about this character, it's kind of pointless. And then there's like the one scene where, well, the de-aging process thing looked ridiculous.
Yes.
And then there's De Niro throwing some guy through his glass door, and then the guy just rolls around and he lets De Niro.
Can you see too when he's thrown to the glass door that it's obvious CGI, whereas 20, 30 years ago, and that's what amazes me is this is made in 2018, 2019. And yet, if you look at Goodfellas, that film looks more modern and fresher than this. And when he's thrown through the glass door, you can see the CGI glass. And it's just a ridiculous scene.
It just seemed like plate glass. I don't know if it was CGI, maybe it was, but it just seemed like plate glass. And the whole thing, because De Niro, I mean, I'm 54. The character, when we first meet him, is like late 50s, is around 40. So he supposedly ages 40 plus years, but you can tell his body is that of an old man.
Yes.
He moves like an old man. It's just, I don't know why. The one thing that was interesting for you, though, is if you look at about the 25 or 26-minute mark, there's a scene where you see a church in the background, and apparently they use this church, St. Matthias, which is about 3 or 4 blocks where I grew up from in Ridgewood in New York. And there's a scene where you look down and you see, if you about 25 or 26 minutes, and you see some old cars, and you see down a road to a big avenue. That's Underdunk Avenue, looking down to Myrtle Avenue, and right behind, and I when I saw the garages, there's about 4 or 5 wooden door garages. I said, "Holy shit! There's St. Matthias in the background." I grew up there. the last time I had a moment like that was in Do the Right Thing 30 years ago, which was in a different direction. But I mean, that was filmed in New York. It's supposed to be like Philadelphia or something, or Scranton or something, but it's New York, and it's Underdunk Avenue, looking down the way towards Myrtle Avenue, and right on the right hand side there you see the backs of some buildings, and there used to be a 5 and 10 there called Woolworths. And so I remember that just struck me. I was like, holy shit, that's my neighborhood.
I did want to ask you, related to The Irishman too. What did you think of like the 20 or 30 minutes towards the end? That was the only thing that I thought was different from Scorsese, but I also thought it was pretty weak
Yeah.
how he executed.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing with the father praying and stuff. Again, it's this Catholic bullshit that
and compared to Big Frank too, as a character, comparing the two Franks, Big Frank is irredeemable and he knows it, whereas this Frank character, Scorsese's trying to add extra layers towards the end and making us try to sympathize with a piece of shit.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, it's on a scale of 1 to 100, I give it maybe a 70. It's passable. It's but even if it had cut an hour, it might get up into the high 70s, maybe top out at 80. But it's nowhere near a great film. And again, the whole thing is rather pointless. The two mob movies that he made that were the best were the early Mean Streets, which was raw and gave a sense of young guys in their prime, or heading towards their prime, and then Goodfellas, obviously.
Do you think that a lot of these great directors were created by necessity? Do you think that you told, I think that you wrote in one of your reviews that Scorsese needs to go back to small budgets so that he can really push himself creatively. This movie was made for like something like $165 million, and you can't see the money on the screen.
Yeah. I mean,
so it obviously was just padding De Niro and Pacino's paychecks, as well as whatever DP that they had that did this horrible de-aging process.
Well, that was, I think, done by, I saw a 20-minute thing on Netflix afterwards, like a 25-minute conversation. That was done by Industrial Light and Magic, the one who do the special effects stuff. So, but it's interesting because one of the things I did want to mention as we're talking, you've got some questions, you can work them in later as we talk, but I'm coming towards the end of this long play I'm doing about this musical, the second musical. I might have it done by this weekend or sometime within 10, 12 days, and then finishing the novel that I'm working on. And I'm talking, one of the things that's interesting, and I talked about this when I did my last Dan Schneider video interview with this actor named Casey Biggs. I don't know if you've seen it yet, but a few weeks ago, a couple of weeks before Oscar and Kiwi died, I saw the reruns of Mary Tyler Moore Show and then the Bob Newhart Show before I went to sleep in the afternoon, and it was so weird because just hearing the music of those shows, the introductory theme music, just brought back so much in terms of memories for me. And then who can turn the world on with a smile. But those shows were so well written. I wrote that thing about the golden age of television being the 1970s. Here you see it. There is no show that is as well written or well acted as the Mary Tyler Moore Show or the Bob Newhart Show. Bob Newhart and Suzanne Plachette, who played a couple on the Bob Newhart Show of the 70s, were the best husband and wife team in comedy on American television ever. The writing is so smart. They don't have extra scenes. You sometimes get in the 22, 23, 24 minutes, whatever it was back in the 70s, you get just what's needed to get the joke or the insight into the character. And it's just so good, and it's not this dumbed down shit. I've seen clips of some of these newer shows, like there's a thing called Fresh Off the Boat, where you have these Chinese Americans, or I don't know if they're Japanese Americans, doing this. It's like, what the fuck is this shit? This is 2019. How could any person who's of Chinese or Oriental ancestry be proud of this shit? Look at what these shows did 40, 50 years ago. I mean, it's just so much better.
Do you think there's anything in even this century that can compare to some of the golden oldies of the 70s?
I've not seen any since this century. I mean, they're digging out stuff from the Copper Age of like Roseanne Barr's old show. They brought her back, and then she fucked up and was a stupid bitch, and they fired her. And now they're doing Roseanne without Roseanne. Although 30 years later, and I've seen a couple of clips of it. It's terrible. That new I saw the original or the first episode of that new Star Trek Discovery about a year or so ago when they had it online, and I've seen people have sent me some clips here and there of it, and it's terrible. It's just absolutely terrible. I mean, it's like people don't know how to write good entertainment anymore, and even worse is most people don't even know what good entertainment is. They're satisfied by this pablum.
What's bizarre about the Star Trek series is that you had all of these sequel series that networks ran, but then you had that Star Trek Continues show, which was bare bones in its budget, but it was more faithful and even in terms of quality, more comparable to the original show. If you've seen all the episodes, I think all of them are good.
Yeah.
And they're relatively well acted too.
Yeah. Oh, one thing I did want to mention too, just to change the topic a bit here. I had shown you before we started. So this is a kid's book with Oscar, and on the cover and on the back is Kiwi, who just died. I'll put it a little closer there. You see my cute, sweet little girl. And actually, what I did was I didn't just print this one up off of Amazon, although Jessica and I are going to print up all of our books so we have at least one original copy of the books. But I printed up 10 copies. I kept one of them. And when Oscar and Kiwi died, I told the veterinarian there that I had written this kid's book after Apollo. My orange cat had died in 2012. And so I gave it to them to give the 9 copies and also a PDF that because I saw this little girl a day or two before Oscar and Kiwi died. This little girl was there holding, like, it turned out to be this pet gerbil, which is larger than I thought gerbils were, and she had tears in her eyes and was holding back tears. And I was like, these kids need to read a book like a kid's book to deal with pet loss and love and these issues. And the book, especially the kids only version, deals with it so well. You have to be about 7 or 8 to read it on your own. But I mean, I think we talked about this book. It sort of follows a formula, not a formula, but it follows some of the things that Pinocchio did. So hopefully, maybe some kids will get some pleasure and some meaning from that book and from Oscar's death. And then I'm also planning a play on my cats. I'm going to do one on pet loss because, I get really sick and tired. We talked about this about most modern plays just being melodramas. Even the greatest plays are based on melodrama. The Williams or Miller and O'Neill, the greatest modern plays. But doing a play about the loss of a pet. I've done the loss of friendships. Here's about the death and the loss of a pet. Doing about these little things that are really the bedrock things that day to day make us human. And you can do it dramatically. And I don't know the exact scenes I'm going to use, but some of it will be at this veterinarian's office. I think I mentioned to you or Jessica did how my little cat Kiwi was on the table with Oscar, and he was like, he was literally just a few hours away, probably no more than 7 or 8 hours away from natural death. And so Kiwi crawled along the table to lay right next to Oscar, and it was as if she, most animals, when they smell the scent of death on another animal, they avoid it. But she sort of was saying, like, look, she was a little bit better, marginally better. She could have made it lasted a day or two before she was in that condition, although she could barely walk herself. And she crawled over in her last burst of energy to lay next to him, as if to say, I want to be with my adopted brother. And it was both a sweet moment and a very insightful moment in that these are not just non-entities. These are beings that have feelings, and they can't cogitate the way we can. But sometimes their instincts are far more insightful. I think of all these dummies who are against abortion and waste all their time on these silly things that don't mean anything. And here, this little cat, at the end of her life, has an intuitive sense of that it's time for me to go with him. And she wanted to sort of, I guess, be there, to be by him, to comfort him, and to somehow communicate that. Yes, a part of her that he was on a blanket, and she probably wanted that. But it wasn't all that. I knew this cat Kiwi, and I knew Oscar so well. And he had one last moment where he was grumbling when they had to pick him up to take him away to put in a new catheter or something. But oh, I've talked so much about my cats. I did those two videos, one 22 minutes, and then the follow-up 39 minutes. So, but anyway, so those are just the things. I'm going to do a play on pet loss too. Oh, and another thing having to do with an animal that really angered me. So on November 22nd, I was driving to work in the morning, and I'm driving along this country road. It's about 20 miles from my town to the town where I work. So I'm midway there. I'm about 12, 13 miles into my drive. And this cop car had started following me for about 5 or 6 miles. It even pulled over to the road to let me pass it and then drove by me. And then as I'm driving, I had to swerve because an animal, maybe a possum or a raccoon or a small rodent got in the road, and I didn't want to hit it. So I swerved. The lights go on. It's this little blonde copette, probably about 25 years old. This little girl who, even me as a middle-aged man without the gun, I could have just thrown her tossed her 20 feet. And she stops me and said, "Oh, why did you swerve like that?" I said, "Well, you've been following me for 5 or 6 miles. Did you not see the little animal that I tried to hit? I try not to kill things." She said, "Oh," and so she looks up. She does her thing, goes radios, finds my license plate to see that there's no warrants, rather than she says she's going to let me go with just a warning. I'm like, okay, whatever. I mean, I've got to go to, where are you going? I'm going to work. You see me in my company uniform or company shirt. And it's like, what kind of a job is it that on a desolate 10-mile stretch of road at about 2:30 in the morning, whatever it was, you're just looking to cause trouble?
Can
And
I ask you a question
yeah,
before you go on? I
thank
went
God I
and
wasn't
visited,
black though.
I went and visited New Jersey and some areas of America, a very small segment, and I saw police cars everywhere.
Yeah.
When we were driving down highways and everything, there you don't have to drive far to see a police car. Now in Canada, and not just in small towns like Dawson Creek, but in areas like Vancouver or Toronto, I have driven through those areas, and you will rarely come upon a police car. But no matter if you're
Money,
in the
money.
train, there's just endless police. So is that just a day-to-day thing for you?
Yeah,
And was it worse when you were a kid?
well, these small town bubbas in rural Texas are different, but yeah, there was a whole department in New York called they would just write out tickets, the ticket bureau. There was a scandal in the 1980s for false tickets being written. I once got a parking ticket that was falsely given to me, and I fought it, and I finally won after they threatened to take away my license. But it's all about money here, because we have cowardly elected officials that the populace elects. They don't want to raise taxes on people. So what do? They get their money somehow for the new park bench or the new project or whatnot by giving out all these bullshit tickets. And so it's such a scam. I just really hate it. It's such a scam, and yeah, it's all because of money. All because of money.
It seems too that I mean America, even though it's stated to be the land of the free and
Mm.
this great democracy, when I visited there, the day-to-day life in America is far worse than Canada.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I mean,
I believe that freedom of speech too is an illusion in both places. I think that there's consequences to saying anything there, whereas there's freedom of expression in Canada, and there are some more legal opportunities for uh, minor imprisonment if you speak out. But I will say that healthcare wise, things that affect everyone day to day, not people that are active in media, it's far worse in America. And there's really no opportunity and no safeguards put in place for its people.
well, because they want money. Everything here is about
Didn't you
money.
post on? You're one of the few people whose Twitter I even glance at. And didn't you post this one fellow or something who had like a $13,000 deductible
Yeah, yeah.
Or
A woman posted that she pays, I think it's 13,000 a year, no, 18,000 a year with a $13,000 deductible. It's like, this is insanity. This is why we need to totally get rid of private insurance. It does nothing but suck up resources. The Democratic debate a day, was it a night or two ago? I watched some of the highlights of whatever 3 hour debate. I watched about 45 minutes of the non-bullshit. And it's like, how are you going to pay for Medicare for all, Bernie, if it's going to cost $3 trillion a year? Well, in private insurance, we're paying with premiums and stuff already paying about 4 or 5 trillion here in this U.S. So going to a nonprofit thing, you're going to actually save $1 or 2 trillion each year. Yes, you're going to have to pay more in taxes, but you're not going to have to pay these deductibles. You're not going to have to pay 18,000 a year or 8,000 or 10,000, whatever it might be. It's so obvious, and it's so obviously being fought against because these people, they don't care about the vast majority of people. There's just chaff, and I've railed about the stupidity of the average person. I'm not saying most people are intelligent or even great human beings, but they are human beings, and they may have a descendant that one day makes faster than light travel possible, or that does find a cure for this cancer, or to finally eliminate this and get rid of this, or make something, come up with a workable nuclear fusion, things that can do this. I mean, the political situation here, there are two overwhelming issues in America in the presidential election. One, getting to a green economy. We've got to stop global warming and get on top of it to try and reverse it. What gets me is you get these people who deny that global warming exists and is man-made, and then you get these other idiots that think that if we don't get it done in 8 years, the planet's going to end up like Venus. They know nothing about science, and people foment both sides. These things. There are dozens of ways that we can clean up the oceans, deacidify the oceans, that we can pull carbon both mechanically and also naturally from the air if we get on it and do it. And there's a guy named Paul Hawken who, if you look up his name and look up his website, he has links to dozens of these things. There are dozens of ways to do things. Some areas of the world you can use solar power. Others it's going to have to be wind. Others it's going to have to be sage or wave power. And other things.
Well, the
No
Green
one.
Party in Canada is their platform is that they'll use thermal power, so they'll get energy from the Earth itself.
Yeah, I mean you're going to have a lot. You got to drill down 20 plus miles into the mantle somehow, and that's.
Well, I've heard. I mean, some of them seem a little bit absurd, but I've heard even that they were thinking of doing that with Yellowstone. That it would be it would be a double bonus to go and harness the lava that is in
and reduce the pressure so that you don't have the supervolcano
and stabilize it so that it doesn't blow one day.
Yeah.
And at the same time, they would be able to use that energy for some resources. But I mean, these are all questions that are beyond me as just a writer and a person.
Yeah.
I was going to get back to your cats and some questions of vulnerability. But before I do that, since you were on the topic of life in America and corporate ownership, I wanted to get a little bit on sort of some Sanders positions and how the others are failing, and also Obama, who I read an article about.
The best thing that Sanders has proposed is mandatory, making corporations have 20% union people, a stock plan, and have at least 45% of workers on the corporate boards. This is something that, unlike universal basic income, which in its best form could be good, but isn't going to pass, and Andrew Yang's has too many flaws. But if you get people involved in corporations, they will. The more people you have involved, the less chance of having greed come to the top. You can mute them because you have more interest in there. And this won't cost a cent if they could pass a law like this. And it would free up literally hundreds of billions of dollars a year in consumer spending that could go to green things and other things that lift people up out of poverty. And the thing that gets me is a lot of the people who support Andrew Yang and universal basic income don't realize that this corporate plan, if Sanders gets it enacted, could do as much or more than their universal basic income could do, and it isn't going to put people basically on the yoke of the government the way the Yang's UBI will. But people don't think I've argued sometimes with some of these Yang people, and I think Yang originally I was a bit more positive to him, but he's clearly a corporatist. He clearly has no sense of wanting to change capitalism or and cage it or whatnot. He's one of these technocrats that is divorced from reality.
Sanders is the only one who really gets that the larger issue isn't just one issue. It's really getting at these corporate bastards.
Yeah.
It's really changing the way the system works. And I do think that if the Democrats screw him again, that he should pull a Teddy Roosevelt and make sure that they lose the election by running as an independent.
Well, the Green Party here in America, the candidate there, Howie Hawken, supports basically most of the stuff Sanders does and a few other things. So if Sanders gets screwed by the DNC, I'm voting Green. I'm just like I did in 2016 for Jill Stein. Howie Hawkins is an even better candidate than Stein.
You've had some amusing comments about Andrew Yang and Pete Buttigieg. Like I said, I sometimes glance at your Twitter. I also like how you compared Elizabeth Warren to a sitcom maid.
Yeah,
because
she has nothing. It's all Sanders light stuff. I do like Tulsi Gabbard, although she sometimes sticks her foot in her mouth. Her thing of vote, there was a dust up of her voting present rather than yes or no on the Trump impeachment. And I understand she wanted to say she wasn't supporting the impeachment and she doesn't support Trump. But clearly, he easily met the standards for impeachment. And the fact that not a single Republican voted to impeach him shows what 45 years have wrought. There were Republicans who voted to impeach Nixon. Not a one has voted to impeach Clinton. Not Clinton. Well, they all voted to impeach Clinton over. I mean, he abused his power, no doubt about it, but it was over a blowjob. There's a big difference between that and conspiring with a foreign country to investigate your political opponent and his son, Biden. Trump is so corrupt. Trump is like these guys in The Irishman because his father made deals with the New York City mafia 50, 60 years ago. But anyway.
I feel, too, that this current political climate, not just in America, but perhaps even worldwide, certainly in my country, there's really no people of the Sandbergian kind. There's no man of the people. Like there's no Tommy Douglases, and Ralph Nader is near death, and there's so many issues with that. I mean, Obama would be a good example of someone who presented himself as a man of the people, and yet I was reading an article recently about how Obama actually has more in kind with George W. Bush, how they're good friends, and how his policies were largely a continuance of George Bush. You also said that something to the effect of if Reagan was the great communicator, which he wasn't, but if he was, then Obama is the great betrayer.
Yeah, he was just all bullshit.
Going after Sanders too just shows his corporate connections.
Yeah, and he's now worth something like $40 million. I mean, and people bring up Jimmy Carter, and I'm not a big Jimmy Carter fan, but at least he was trying. Harry Truman, when he left the presidency, he got a presidential pension, but he went back to becoming a private citizen. And and another thing that gets me is all these presidential libraries. What's this president? We don't need to know every fucking detail about Nixon, and not that they even release all the real details. I mean, it's such bullshit. Oh God, I just can't. I mean, if I could have my way, I would restart this country, the U.S. Have a new constitution drafted up. I would, if I were a benevolent dictator, I'd do a lot of things differently. But anyway,
I wanted to talk to you about something that's sort of more related to your cats and vulnerability. But watching your video, it was very moving. But the question, I think, was what you missed the most.
yeah.
But
What affects me the most?
my father once told me that I'm so cynical and yet so idealistic, that I have high expectations on life. But it has always been difficult for me to be vulnerable with these type of things, and especially to infuse that in art. And I struggle with it still at this moment. I don't, when it comes to my pets, they would be up there with what matters to me the most too. But it is incredibly difficult to even talk about their loss and what it means to me, the way that you are able to communicate it.
Well,
How do you do it, and how are you able to find the moments where Kiwi goes and embraces Oscar, and not focus on their loss?
well, I do focus on, you have to multitask. I get back to that story that I wrote called "Elements of a Story" for this guy who contacted me 7, 8 years ago, and Jessica didn't like him because she said he was a user. But you have to be able to look at it. I mean, for example, I said Jessica and I are going to go to one of the local humane societies here. I'd gone the past couple of afternoons and seen a few kittens that we're probably going to adopt at least one, maybe two today. There's one kitten that came up and was licking me on the face. Her shelter name is Dolce. She seems to have a real affection for me. But these little things, you see them. This cop trailing me and me swerving to miss an animal. That's an anecdote. There's so much that happens at work. There's so many little moments that happen. You just have to notice them and speak directly about them. You don't have to. Jessica was showing me this guy, Robert, who's an English writer, Robert McFarlane, his supposed science
Yes.
writing, and I looked at his stuff, and it's like, my God, he's so verbose, so many unneeded modifiers, so many unneeded details, and it's being promoted by the Lauren Isley Society, and these people, they don't understand that Isley was a great writer and what made him great, because McFarlane's writing is nothing like Isley's. Just because they write a bit about science and nature doesn't make him Lauren Isley. Oh, you should love Robert McFarlane. No, his writing isn't particularly good. It's not terrible. It's not as bad as the Dave Eggers and the David Foster Wallaces and the Zadie Smiths, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it's not particularly good writing. And this, but most people can't do that. Separate those things. You have an issue apparently in the other direction in terms of being able to speak about the things that you can notice some of these things, but you have a difficulty in speaking about it. So it's not noticing them that you're missing, but uh, transforming them into something that you can put out. I've always looked at myself as like uh, uh, there's a technology.
It's not even necessarily transforming them, because I can write about ideas, but the difficulty is writing about these subjects without just focusing on the pain of these subjects, and multitasking, adding the moments.
Well, you got to train yourself. You got to train yourself because, as I've said once or twice before in these interviews, some famous painter, and I forget which one, it's been attributed to many of them, said that it took me 50 years to learn how to paint a masterpiece in 3 or 4 or 5 hours, whatever it was. You have to train yourself. Learn to mute the emotion and focus on the art. Because again, I've said it, art is primarily an intellectual exercise. Don't believe these people who say that it's an emotional exercise for us. No one is touched by the art emotionally, because primarily because if you don't have the intellectual ability to understand what the words are saying, the emotion isn't going to get there. This isn't a visual medium writing where if I see Max von Sydow in The Virgin Spring, his shoulders slumping from behind as he's playing a knight whose daughter's been raped and killed. There's no words that are needed there. I can get that primarily emotional. Now, we can talk about the technical aspects intellectually of that film, but that's going to hit you first emotionally. With writing, it can't, because writing requires you to have the intellectual ability to make a narrative from what are basically these dark runes on a white medium somehow. These, I mean, this is the closest thing to telepathy. So you have to be able to train yourself to mute that emotional need or whatever it is, and focus first on the writing, first on the intellectual part.
I agree. It is difficult to put into practice, despite that, because I think that we do respond to the emotion first as people in many regards. I wanted to talk about a little bit of it. You're very good at that aspect, sort of the inner and outer critic, where you're able to. I mean, even your own stuff in true life, it's sort of like you getting outside of yourself and detaching yourself from that emotional moment, and just looking at it objectively. At least that's how it's written. I don't know how it works for you as a person.
Well, let me give you an example. I mentioned Kiwi's last burst of energy when she went to see Oscar on the table when they were both put down. Now, for me, I want to know everything from cradle to grave. I knew these kittens, both of them. We got Oscar when he was maybe 4 months, and we got Kiwi when she was maybe about 2 months. And if I had my brothers, Jessica didn't want me to take a photo of them on the table when they were dying. She didn't want to remember them that way. But for me, I want to know it all. I still remember, I think I've mentioned this in some of the things, when my dad died. He had been about 180, 190 pounds most of his life, 5'9". When he died, he was maybe 100 pounds, a skeleton from 2 types of cancer that killed him. But in my mind, I see my dad, I see him as the robust man when I was a tot. I see him as the senile guy going senile when I was in my preteens and teens. I see him as the man dying, and I see him as the corpse that was there. I can look at the photos of him as a young man. I can see him as a robust, handsome guy. I see him as the personality. I see him arguing with my Hicksville Aunt Dottie's husband, as in the play. I see him standing up, doing things.
Is Aunt Dottie Darla?
Yeah, her real name was Dottie.
Okay. Because I was reading some of your poems and I found Aunt Dottie in there,
Yeah.
and I had forgotten. About some of these poems, but I think you had one where Billy the Kid is involved in it, and Aunt Dottie is sort of vigil through your dad's death. You've got a few poems with Aunt Dottie. I was just curious. Go on.
Well, my point is that, though, for me, I don't shy away from. Both Jessica and I were crying when Oscar and Kiwi were put down. But at the same time, there was a deep sense of relief because Kiwi had been going downhill for a year, Oscar for about 6, 7 months. Oscar actually slid worse, and he was put down at 11:47 a.m. Kiwi 3 minutes later. But it's one of those things. I think I just this morning I was writing to this guy on this website Quora. They solicited me for some reason to answer stuff. Maybe someone else did about a couple of months ago, and I was saying that I look at my life and my memories, even the bad ones, the bad people I've known, whether they were killers or pedophiles, whether it's some of these females that I've written about who've used and abused me over the years. They're all my memories, and even the nasty or bad ones, I sort of cherish. I don't like to put them away. I don't like to not look at them, because they're mine. Good, bad, or indifferent, they are mine. Oscar, whether he was the young kitten the first night we got him when he ransacked our bathroom, whether it was in his last moments, Kiwi, whether it was this, that, or the other thing, all of that is Kiwi. All of that is Oscar. All of these interviews that we've done are a minor fraction of all that is Dan Schneider. Dan Schneider is the Danny Wagner that watched TV and loved Mary Tyler Moore and Suzanne Plachette on the Bob Newhart show. Dan Schneider is the guy talking to you now. Dan Schneider is the guy, hopefully in another 30 or 40 years, I'll still be here and lucid and in good intellectual shape. Dan Schneider's the kid who worked at a mob front. Dan Schneider's the kid who was in a all Hispanic gang except for himself. Dan Schneider's the one who liked the New York Yankees as a kid and still does, but has grown beyond sports, that it's not that big a thing anymore. All of these things. So you have to look at these things in the totality, and there's so much there to plumb. As I've said many times before, you can't just think about yourself, but there's so much there that happens in any given day. I see customers at the store. Some of the truck drivers I talk to as I'm unloading the trucks, and we talk in cliches mostly. Yeah, how's you doing? Oh, drive safely. Yeah, how you doing? You know, it's the same, but there's a rhythm that comes with these things, and even though like the next I'm off today from work, but the next 3 days I'll be working probably 10 days each. Up until the day before Christmas Eve day, and I got to do all this stuff because the bosses don't. The company I work for is cheap, and I'm 55 and I'm doing stuff that people 10, 20, 25, 30 years younger than me don't do and don't want to do and can't do, and it's frustrating, but I mean it is what it is, and you have to learn to accept these. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was thinking, I'm sometime early this next year, I'm going to send around some of my plays again. I'm going to send around, maybe see if I can find some European presses maybe that might want some of my novels. But what really gets me is that I was thinking about this guy. I've mentioned him before. This guy named Bob Grumman, who was this bad poet that I mentioned. Yeah, the Grumbler. And what?
Zeus keeps like showing interest in the garage, just letting you know.
Yeah, well, he's not going out in the garage. Zeus shows the interest in the garage. He'll be occupied if we get some kittens. He'll be interested in getting to. We'll have to keep them separated for a week or so. But this Bob the Grumbler reminded me of this Henry Darger. The character. The guy who.
He's the one with the Mathemaku, right?
Bob Grumbler was the Mathemaku. Henry Darger was the guy who was.
Yeah, he's the one with the 9 million words of nothing.
Yeah, and girls with penises and the land. And it frustrates me that he had this documentary a decade or so ago made about him by this woman named Jessica Yu, and it's like these kinds of things. Why would someone waste so much time on something not that interesting? It's because this filmmaker couldn't understand why I'm a great writer and I should be the subject of a documentary or my life, my website, rather than this Darger who had absolutely no talent whatsoever, either in drawing. He traced his visual art and his stories. I remember when that Henry Darger's work about 10 or 12 years ago was online. I remember reading major portions of that work, and then they took it down because even though he never copyrighted, I guess someone had formed an estate for him and they wanted to milk money off of this dead guy. Just like that woman who had the photographs that were found, whose name I forget.
Vivian Meyer.
Vivian Meyer, yeah. Vivian Meyer. So now some bastards have, instead of putting her stuff in the public domain, which is where it should be since she's dead, now people are trying to make money from her that she never made herself, and it's disgusting. And this gets back to the corporations and the capitalism and this whole fucking country where the old saying about in America we know the price of everything but the value of nothing, and that when it gets to art, this is more acute than ever, and that this crap gets valued when good stuff doesn't. It is just ridiculous. And it reminded me, I'm just looking at some few things I wanted to mention. They reminded me of how I was used by a few websites early on when Cosmoetica first started getting popular, about 05, 06, 07. There was a website called They Shoot Pictures, Don't They? Now the website is mostly known because it's got the 1,000 greatest films. Every year this guy compiles a list of the supposed 1,000 greatest films based upon other lists, which gives absolutely no insight into the quality of stuff. But I remember originally I had posted a number of my early foreign film reviews in 06, 07 there, and I did about maybe 40 or 50 of them. And I remember him initially telling me he was excited because mine were by far getting him more traffic than anything else. And I said, well, that's good and whatnot. And then supposedly he wanted to remove my stuff, and he did remove it because supposedly his girlfriend didn't like my opinions or something. But I think what the thing was, uh, I had gotten him enough traffic that he sustained some of his own traffic, and then it's just like, he just got rid of me. And there's another site, No Ripcord, which did a similar thing, got rid of my stuff after I had, again, I was told by the website owner mine was the most popular traffic, but I got in, I had on this other guy's review of something, some film, I talked about how he missed the stuff, and the guy he missed some stuff in the film, and the guy who owns the website was like, oh, we don't criticize each other on this website. I said, you have a criticism website and you're not going to criticize each other? What the fuck is that? And then uh, well, there's a few other things, but these are the kinds of things that just really aggravate me, because people, they never learn, they never do anything. This site Quora that I mentioned that had solicited me to respond for some reason, they I guess deleted a few of my answers, because when some coward starts making snarky comments, of course I'm going to be better and get them back more snarkily, but apparently that violates their be nice rule or something. But it's like, do you not see that the person initially was being nice? And this gets to the whole internet. How many times have people gone apeshit and acted like assholes? Then when they get their asses handed to them, they complain to whoever the moderator of the
Do you
website is.
feel? I mean, I've certainly felt this in my life because I'm very direct in my opinions too. But do you feel that if you have an interaction with someone, whether it's online or otherwise, that 9 times out of 10, uh, you had this conversation with this person. They initially start insulting you. You rip apart their response and respond in kind.
Yeah.
And you're the one who deals with the consequences.
Yeah.
That the other person, though, who was the initiator and started the whole thing, gets nothing. And I have felt that in my personal life, online, any kind of response where 9 times out of 10, at least, I'm the one who deals with the consequences.
Yeah, and that's true, because it's easier, especially like I a couple of months ago I saw this old thread that Jessica had gotten in an argument with this woman named Susan Belay, and on this guy's Philadelphia Inquirer website, and by the way, the cat that you see people here that I'm holding is Zeus. He's my he's one of the 2 cats that we have still. Before we go look at some other cats, and he came. He's 7 years old. This is Jessica's great admirer, who's always licking Jessica, his mommy. But anyway, he wants to go down. Okay, go down to this. But yeah, it's because it's easier, because usually the people who get snarky are long time on a website, or they're friends with the moderator or the host of the website, and you might have heard Zeus just meow in the background.
Why did you bring up that argument with her from like
I just mentioned.
15 years ago?
See, Jessica walks in and out. Now she's going to go run so that we can eat and go see the cats.
No, but I gotta brush my teeth and I want to go run.
And so these people are that way, and they it's just human nature. People want to be, they want to be the center. They want to be the friend. They want to be the important one. And if they can't get, and usually what happens is the person who starts the fight, if they get bitch slapped enough, they're the ones that start complaining as, oh, this person's attacking me. No, you bring something up and you can't defend yourself intellectually, so then you cry foul.
That's an example of a narcissist. They'll pick a fight, you fight back, and then they blame you for being aggressive, and it's like, yes, you started. Yeah. They're the aggressor.
Yeah. Okay. You want to sit here?
What's so funny?
She just have Jess as part of the interview.
Don't put that thing online about that fight. Put that online.
Yeah. Okay.
Cut that out.
Go.
Please don't talk about things I've done on put that online. Don't do that.
No one cares about that idiot Frank Smith, or whatever the hell his name was. Frank something or other. But anyway,
Peter's just laughing.
Yeah. So anyway, go on to another question. Let's change the topic.
Well, I wanted to ask you. Someone mentioned to me recently. They said, you know, Peter, that you really didn't have much of a peer group around, and it's true. I mean, when I was a kid, I was mostly alone by myself.
Well,
It's
you're up in northern British Columbia. Is it snowing there? So I mean,
but the people that I was around were generally quite a bit older than me. Whereas I think that you were around people of your own age, kids your own age. My friends are you're in your 50s, Jess is in her 40s. I have other people that are around my life. There's very few that are around my own age. Um, and do you think that because certainly I can intellectually relate to anyone's situation, but do you think that visceral relation is important in your development? Did you, when you were around kids, did you relate to them, or did you find yourself sort of being the odd out?
both to a certain degree. I mean, at a certain level, day-to-day level, you learn to, if I was playing Chinese handball in junior high with some kids, and you'd be like, oh, you talk about the usual bullshits. That girl's got nice tits. The Yankees, did they win? Did the Giants win a football game? Whatever it might be. But on the other hand, I was always operating. I could also look and like down at an anthill and say, "Oh, here they go scurrying around, this and that." And this is one of the things I think that got me a lot of aggravation was, especially when I was interested in a lot of the girls, some of them that I've written in some of these plays, was that I could see them both as being above the ants, but yet still being somewhat ant-like, and wondering why they couldn't be less ant-like and more like me. Um, and uh, that then when I got into the arts and started dating mostly artistic types, they could see some of these things more than the other people, but they'd have the concomitant weight of their emotional inability to deal with their ability to see a little bit farther beyond, and so it's one thing or another, and it's one of the frustrating things about.
Are you gonna make me have to take my key?
Yes. Go take your key while we're talking. What are you're waiting for me to we're going to be going. I told you.
Do
Um,
you want to cut this short and we can talk again?
no. She's going to go running and then she's going to come
Oh,
back, shower. So there's a cat, like I said, named Dulce. Then there's this boy and girl, brother and sister, that would be interesting to adopt because the sister, they call them Itsy and Bitsy there. The girl is smaller, deeper orange. The boy is sort of peach colored, but he may have been adopted out. There's a few little black kittens that are hellions. There's a few other ones. Um, the one that I like, Dolce, just apparently came online today, is available to adopt. Hopefully, we'll see what happens. Could adopt one today, and maybe a week or two from now adopt the second one once the other one, because we have to isolate them for about 7 days so that they get comfortable and they don't get too stressed, and that our guys don't get too stressed. Baby Thor is uh, not really the issue. He got stressed when we shaved him, and he's gotten over some illnesses that I gave him. An illness we had to give him a pill and whatnot. But Zeus is pretty laid back, and but I know Thor can handle it because when Zeus came 7 years ago, he was a kitten, and Thor was like, whatever. Um, who knows how Zeus will react? I don't think he'll react badly because as long as he's got his mommy to lick, he doesn't mind. But go ahead, ask
not
a.
a baby anymore though.
No, but he'll always be a big baby. So
I'm gonna do.
all right,
I'm gonna do my run now.
all right. Go run, lock the door. Go on with whatever else.
Did you save this segment?
Yeah. I'm recording. Yeah.
I stumbled upon a quote. I think it was Don Moss who shared it. From Tabor. It's something like the one plants trees knowing that he will never sit in their shade has at least started to understand the meaning of life. And I don't like these kind of simplistic quotes. But you know, I wanted to ask you, as someone who has been neglected in many parts of your life, not just in the arts, but it seems like you're constantly condescended to and rejected in many different areas of your life as a intelligent person. What that means to you? Do you really feel? I remember watching an interview, I think, with Woody Allen, where he didn't value the posterity, but do you see the value in the posterity, and what does it mean to you?
Well, yeah, I'm going to be gone. There's not going to be nothing but the posterity. My works are the only thing that are going to survive. My body, uh, I want to be cremated. So I don't want to end up as a skeleton in some thing, or my brain in some vat. Uh, so yeah, I mean,
But it seems like the general cycle is that a great artist or a great thinker of any kind leaves behind their works, and that is absorbed by a increasingly smaller populace and then diffused outward into the future.
yeah.
I think that that's a positive thing. I think it will always be that way, where there's
I
the
say this
vast
to
majority.
to Jess all the time. Art is always going to have only the small amount of people, and those at the best really get it. There's lots of fake artists. If you were to find maybe 2 or 3 people, 2 or 3% of people would claim they're involved in the arts, but of that 2 or 3%, it's really like 0.02% that actually make anything of any value, even good, much less great. And so those people are always going to be small. They're always going to have a small audience, but they are the movers and shakers. These are the people that get inspired and inspire other people. I do get angry over things like my cats and what suffering like that, the bullshit at work, all these bullshit jobs. Jessica always saying, "Well, I work a bullshit job," and I say, "Yeah," and I come home and I complain if my back hurts or whatever. But Jessica has a degree and she works now at a company where she's doing sciencey stuff. But she's always complaining about it and about her her coworkers and shit. And it's like, you know, I say we're not gonna. You can't get satisfaction from regular jobs. It's frustrating enough that people like these Zadie Smiths or Robert McFarlanes or whatnot, people who range from at best passable to terrible, uh, get published. I mean, I'm not even looking to make the bulk of my income, or even all or bulk of my income from writing. Just that be able to break beyond just the people who read the website, because most of them are dirt poor, and they don't, and even they don't have there's maybe a few dozen people on the E list, or there's the young girl
Ireland.
in Ireland. What's her name again? Oh God, I'm sorry.
Laura Woods.
Laura Woods. Laura. I'm sorry, Laura. But she's real smart. If I had a daughter, I'd like a daughter like her. Like there's a couple of young girls that I worked with over the last year at this place, that year or two at this place that I'm working now, that I would like as daughters, as just good people, because one girl was real spunky, another one is real level-headed, and they're good young kids. But Laura's the intellectual one who I'd like if I had a daughter. But she can read Jess's book or my book, and without any prompting, she brings up things and sees things that other people just can't get. These idiots. How the fuck can this girl, Laura, who's 22, 23, 24, whatever she is now, she's 25 or under, she's no more than 25. She's working, I think, at a supermarket, or she was working, and maybe now she's doing, I think, some volunteer work as well, from what Jess might have said. And she has no quote unquote formal training or what, yet she understands words. She understands these things critically more than these dolts who are in the book industries. I mean, it's like I send around these plays and they don't want real drama. I'm doing. This novel that I'm working on. I mentioned the play, but the novel that I'm working on concomitantly with, concurrently rather, with the play is now about 73,000 words, and the play is about 57,000, and it's near done. This book will probably end up about 80,000, and I've actually done something differently than I did before. Is that I wrote 86,000 words or so, pared back to about 56,000. Then I've now got it up to about 73,000. It'll probably end up 80,000, no more than 80,000. But
why did you take out so many words?
Because I wanted to get the spontaneity of someone. The main character in one half of the book is the wife of Gorgeous George, the wrestler, and I picture her as a sort of the girl from Days of Heaven, from the Malick film, And
Yeah, you
so
told me that you used epigraphs from Days of Heaven. Did you remove that stuff or something? I think you were telling me
no,
that you
no,
felt that.
no,
Okay.
no. The epigraphs to each chapter has something to do with that. But I wanted to get that spontaneity. And then the other half of the book is Gorgeous George in conversation or interviews talking about his life directly. And so it's structured to a degree, sort of like the Bridge books, Mr. and Mrs. Bridge. But on the other hand, it's something different. And to get the spontaneity, I wanted to put it out, cut it back, then add things and sparingly so that I get a combination of poesy and also spontaneity. Because the female character, the wife of Gorgeous George, can sometimes be insightful and then sometimes say some stupid shit. She'll sometimes sound like a cracker. Other times she'll sound like a fairly intelligent person. But she's clueless about it. So,
What is
but
the title of this book?
it's Noir Kid, Noirchid, a combination of noir and orchid, because Gorgeous George was called the human orchid. So I originally was going to make the Noir Kid of the title be Gorgeous George and have him be dark and stormy. But then I said, no, the wife being it is more interesting. And there's still some things that I'm going to do in there. And it's just going through it, just churning it and turning it and playing with it and writing stuff and tossing the stuff that doesn't need to be there. Some of the stuff that I tossed was just stuff that some of the chapters for example, they go from chapter 1 to 13 in the Weiss voice, and then there are 12 interview sections. The interview sections start off at the end of his life, Gorgeous George, in 1962. So the first interview is in 62. The last one takes place in 1937, I think. So he goes backwards in time. So we get him devolving as she's evolving. And at a certain point they cross. And this is when they get divorced in like 1951. And it's just interesting because you're doing things playing with it. And with the play that I'm doing, the musical, it's different than the first musical in that there's more self-consciousness that the characters are in a musical, because sometimes they'll just play like I just sketched out a scene where uh, uh, which song is it? It might be Gordon Lightfoot's Sundown, the song Sundown by Gordon Lightfoot, a Canadian singer, who but I have the music is playing, but no one's singing it, and so the music is playing, and the Danny Wagner character is reacting to it after he's been rejected by the Megan character, and so yeah, you have to do all these different things, but I don't want to get too much talking about the art, so I want to get away from it. So what was the original question again?
I have forgotten since you went on so long,
okay.
but I can we can talk about some other things anyway.
Yeah.
I wanted to just do some. I think it was about posterity actually, but you've answered most of that. I wanted to ask you about things that I feel are so multifaceted that you said that I can observe things and I may need to work on the transforming and muting the emotion, but I feel that that ability to notice is very rare among any kind of person. I was reading about the passenger pigeon and how it's roughly extinct. I've heard of these many so-called extinctions. I think there was a type of fox, for instance, that they thought was extinct for a decade or two, and how it went away. And what I don't like about the rhetoric of this is that they use it for the global warming platform. But many extinctions are necessary and they're just part of the ecosystem. They're not necessarily a direct result of global warming. So I feel that it is the type of thing that you were talking about where there's extremism from both sides, the right and the left, where the left is crying out that we must preserve the passenger pigeon and the right is saying that there's absolutely nothing going wrong with it. Why do you think that people think in such a, not necessarily just dualistic, but almost tunnel vision way of evaluating any kind of situation, such as the passenger pigeon?
Well, the passenger pigeon is long extinct, and there are famous anecdotes about in the 19th century uh, in the
Well,
early mid.
they said actually that the article I was reading, and this is I wanted to have two questions about this, but they said that the last one is dead.
Well, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean that died almost a century ago in the early 20th century. There were so many of them that you could actually sometimes you could, if you had a net, you could swoop some out of the sky. And that's just wanton killing. They almost did it to the American bison or buffalo. They the clubbing of certain types of seals. The auk, the great auks. The great auk was driven to extinction. They were the equivalent of penguins up here in the northern hemisphere in the Arctic. Um, these are. I mean, yes, extinction is a natural part of the life process of Earth. But global warming is a problem. I mean, it could get to the point where it could threaten us with extinction if we don't do anything for the next century. But it's not. We're not going to become Venus. And people like to think in black and white terms. Most people are just simplistic. You can't get beyond it. Jessica is constantly with the why don't they get this? Why does someone like this Laura Woods see something, and yet someone who runs a publishing house doesn't see it? I mean, if I open up, if, this guy I told you who I wrote the elements of the story for, is Craig something or other. Craig Cochran was his name. His book is a good little book. I think I rated maybe an 80, 85. It's a good, solid little novel. It's better than anything published. It's not anywhere in a league with my work or Jessica's, but I could see it obviously. I could see Don Moss's poems, his long book length poem Dominions. I mean, the only poem I would say is above that is The Bridge by Hart Crane in the last 100 years. It's
And
obvious that
your
it's a great book.
American Imperium?
Well, that's not a book length poem. The American Imperium is maybe about 15, 20 page, 18, 20 pages, something like that. Don's book is like what, 80 pages.
Yeah.
So, but and as far as I know, Don has written barely any poetry since then or before then. So he just had this one great flowering. But people think in these simplistic, dualistic terms: good, bad, right, wrong. I was arguing with some of these people on Quora, just to give you an example scientifically. They were talking how birds are still dinosaurs, and I was saying like, because just like they demoted Pluto, now they've gone from a process. You probably know the difference between monophily and paraphily and the separating of species, how a group can include another group. And so in that sense, they wanted the new paraphyletic way of looking at dinosaurs is that birds are on a par, aves are on a par with, say, sauropods, the brontosauruses, and theropods, like the meat eaters, like Tyrannosaurus and Allosaurus. Whereas I say, at least the old paraphyletic way of looking at it, birds have evolved past dinosaurs. I mean, and they didn't go beyond. We don't use the word, but yeah, all birds are endothermic. Some dinosaurs were, some weren't, some were in the middle. All birds have feathers. Some dinosaurs did, some didn't. All birds have beaks and no teeth. Those are three huge structural differences that make birds have gone beyond, just like the way apes have gone beyond monkeys, or monkeys have gone beyond their shrew-like, lemur-like ancestors. At a certain point, a difference in degree becomes a difference in kind, and a lot of the people in the sciences nowadays, natural sciences, don't agree with that or don't see that. But I think my view is the correct way to approach science and do it. But most people can't see that way. Most people want to be part of a structure. And other people like this idiot Bob Grumman, who's now dead, and he might have been a decent guy, but he's a moron. But they so desperately want to be seen as different that they make up shit. So you have those extremes of the people who are so ensconced and want to be part of something, and other people who want to be rebels just to say that they're rebels and are not part of that thing, but they don't accomplish anything. Neither of those extremes accomplish anything. If you accomplish something, you should at least be rewarded with it or whatnot. And that's the frustrating thing dealing you know, and the stuff that gets me angry. It's not just about the cats and the publication and the work bullshit. I don't get as depressed about it as Jessica does, but it's frustrating, and it's frustrating to see people rewarded. I've mentioned sometimes some of the not so nice people I've known, and I'm not talking about the criminal element, just some of the people in the arts, some of the women that I dated who are users and abusers, and uh, they don't see this. They don't have the ability to step out and look at themselves. But that's just it. You can't say anything more than that. They don't have the ability. Why can't I? I don't have the ability to dunk a basketball. I'm not that athletic. Even in my prime, when I was 25 or so, I could not dunk a basketball. I couldn't even really come particularly close. And it's not because white men can't jump. It's just that this particular white man couldn't jump that high. But if they don't have the ability, I don't. It's like they don't have the ability. They don't have the ability. That's just the way it is.
I did want to ask you too. You've noticed this through several science articles if you peruse around the internet, but they seem to be so behind many of these science sites. I see very few that are up to date at all, like the missing link talk lately. There's Australopithecus, a different version a different species was discovered this year, and they're always talking about a missing link or this is the new Lucy or what have you.
We're all links. We're all
yeah,
links.
they're all part of the same linkage. And the thing is that I have seen these articles sometimes word for word reprinted over a 5-year period. What was it that I was would piss me off? So I finally just muted the word out of my Google search. And I think it was dark matter. Oh. Every week or so, they discovered what dark matter is, and they finally know what dark matter was. So I was sick of reading that. And the missing link thing is another thing that raises my ire, because they're never going to find the one perfect link that binds us. They'll know more about our evolution, but I get sick of this one missing link talk, and I'm particularly tired of how they take these articles and then reuse them over a 5 to 10 year period.
Yeah, dark matter is the thing that gets to me, because it's like they haven't shown nor proven dark matter. They've shown the effects of dark matter. There's a thing called modified Newtonian dynamics, MOND, that explains a lot as well and some better than so-called dark matter. It wouldn't shock. And again, I've argued with scientists on social media and whatnot. Is that mathematics is not a part of the cosmos. Mathematics is a language that we use to describe the cosmos. And I can very easily imagine if there's other intelligences out there that are at our level above, that their view of the universe through different sensory organs, they would have a mathematics totally. They might look at let's say they have astronomy or something comparable to astronomy, and they know about the basic structure of matter and the universe. They might have something that they might have a sensory organ that's evolved that we have no clue about, and they may see order in the cosmos and see it much more simply than we do and better than we do, because maybe they're a million years ahead of us in evolutionary terms with these different organs. And I'm just the anthropocentrism of human beings is something that we really find very difficult to get beyond. And when I say we as a society and as individuals, I always fight against it. I do it when I talk, for example, about animals like my cats. I call them he and she. They have sexes. They're not its. An it is a rock. A rock is an it. A plastic toy is an it. My plate that I eat a sandwich from is an it. A dog or a cat or any kind of animal is either he or she, or intersex rather than I don't even get off on a lot of that nonsense that just goes
gender fluid.
Yeah, these whole things but the one thing I will say, the gender fluid stuff reminds me of Bob Grumman. These are people who don't have anything else in their life, and I don't care. I don't care
Well,
that
I
you're
mean,
gay.
Billy,
Hold on. Let me stop.
Williams,
Let me
didn't
just
he
talk.
say that he was gender fluid?
Who?
He was a good actor once, at least.
Who?
Billy D. Williams, he's gender fluid.
Oh, I don't know. But the thing is these people don't have anything to hang their hats on. No accomplishments, no intellectual ability, and so we're going to be proud that with this. It's like, I don't care that someone thinks that they're the opposite sex and they were born in, or they're interested. I don't care that you're gay. I don't care that this person has this viewpoint or whatnot, as long as they're not fucking around and fucking people over. But uh, people will hang their hats on these things that are totally subjective, totally within their own solipsistic view of themselves and the cosmos, so that no one can criticize them. Well, fine. You don't want criticism. Don't interact with people. If you're not willing to get criticized, don't interact. I'm plenty open to criticism, but people get angry if I criticize back or I defend something that I've stated or whatnot. And this again gets to the anthropocentrism, the solipsism of the species and the self that we are a part of. And hopefully 100, 200 years from now, when we've put the global warming crisis behind us and we have colonies on the moon and Mars and maybe on some of Jupiter's and Saturn's moons, and we are about to take our first steps beyond the solar system as a species, hopefully by then we'll have grown up and we won't worry about this shit. And we won't worry about stupid shit like religion and all this stuff that confines us and people let define themselves. I mean, it's just it's it's just so much of life is such bullshit. I was thinking, I'm going to be 55 in a little over a month, about a month and a half, and I will have then, since working since six, worked almost 50 fucking years doing stuff, trying to make money just to survive. There's something wrong in a society. And I'm by far, by no means, my wife and I don't live paycheck to paycheck because we save for things and save for rainy days. But we're not rich. If we didn't have medical insurance and Jessica got a lump on her breast or something, we could be wiped out. For a few $100,000 or whatnot. What it would cost for a surgery in 2 days in a hospital. But it's ridiculous that I have spent such an inordinate amount of time having to do all this shit, even now, and how much better would I be as a person? How much more quickly would I have evolved? How much more great stuff would I have put out if there had been someone who was able to say, wow, this kid, even when he was just 3 or 4 years into my poetry writing, this kid can do things other people can't. We have to encourage him. And say to the Bob Grummans, you don't have it. Stop wasting your. That guy, he was 24 years older than me. He died when he was 72 and I was 48, I think. So it's been 6+ years since he's died. What a waste of this guy's life. And he was one of these people who worked as a replacement teacher, not a replacement teacher, a substitute teacher at different schools and whatnot. And I can just imagine the way he was made fun of by the kids, because I mean, he looked like an idiot. He did. I still remember this video of him just going, blah, 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 acting crazy, uh, and and then I mentioned this guy
He
live.
was someone who reminded me of a dishwasher that I worked with,
Oh,
who
yeah.
eventually went and tried to shoot some people at a local restaurant, and he sort of had that same off quality to him. I think I didn't see the video where he's going blah blah, but I heard him speak,
Yeah.
and I saw his facial expressions, and he had something clearly wrong with him.
Yeah, and he spent. I don't think he ever married. I may be wrong. It wouldn't shock me if he, or I mentioned that fat guy Lyle Daggett. It wouldn't surprise me if either of them were 70. Or Lyle was a 60-something-year-old virgin. It wouldn't shock me. There are those people that are these social losers, outcasts, unless they paid for hookers or whatnot. But I don't think Lyle would have, and Bob Grumman would probably have scared off most hookers. Um, but these people, they just it's sad in one way, but on the other hand, you have to be recognize things. Here, you there? You back? No. Oh, you're a handsome devil. Oh, this fluffy boy. There he is. Good boy. Good boy. You back, Peter?
I'm back.
Okay, so people know, and you can see here, I've got my other cat, Thor, here. Now, Thor is 12 years old. Look at this handsome boy. Look at this handsome devil.
He's the pretty boy of the Schneider clan.
Yeah. Now, Thor is 12. Now, with Oscar and Kiwi's deaths, Thor, it took him a dozen years, but now he's the top of the heap. He's 5 years older than Zeus, and he's my pretty boy. But if you can see here, and I'll hold him up, you can see Thor. He doesn't have a long snout, so he looks like a perpetual kitten. So just to throw a science term there, Thor is he's neotenous. You know what that means, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Neotenica.
yeah. So he's my boy, and he's my furry boy. Thor had an issue a couple of months ago. He got sick because we shaved him because he wasn't cleaning himself well. He sort of got to old middle. He's basically about my age in cat years, and he was like, "Fuck it, I'm not cleaning myself anymore." So we shaved him, and we thought it would be good. But then he got so upset from being shaved. Yeah, it was like Samson losing his hair to Delilah, and he got ill, and he had a hemobard virus that reared itself, and he started pooping because the hemobard made him. I guess it made him not incontinent, but no, I guess it gave him constipation, and he was yowling. We gave him some medicine for 2 or 3 weeks, and it got him better again. So now he's back in shape. And now he's the oldest. He's the senior Schneider cat. So that's Thor. So I want to give him my 2 surviving cat screen times, since I've talked about Oscar and Kiwi, and I've talked about Apollo and Shadow and other things. But so why don't we do? Let's let this run for maybe another 15-20 minutes. What other specifics do you have? Let's go through whatever.
Well, I mean, when you were talking about these creatures, and I've conceived of these kind of beings with greater sensory understanding, I thought of the poem Margrave by Jeffers. I've got my selected Jeffers right here. And I've always thought Margrave is a great poem. I think of lines like, "The rumor of human consciousness has gone abroad in the world." And he ends his poem by saying it's very well ordered. I think you said something to that effect. I feel that art is the only medium that allows us to correct our errors, not necessarily our mistake. If science, it dates so badly. And I think that if there are beings with greater sensory understanding, that they come to science and see it as sort of childish. Whereas with art, you get the perspective. So even if it is a flawed perspective, even if it is something lacking, you get an in into that human being. And I think any being, no matter their sensory understanding, no matter how far they've gone ahead of us in creating art, or something greater, I think they would be able to appreciate that perspective on some level.
Yeah, and but the interesting thing, I just held up my cat Thor. There are things, and I mentioned Kiwi's little recognition, I think, of her impending death. But Thor had an interesting thing with Oscar the last couple of months. But before we shaved him, and he got upset, and then after he recovered a bit, in the last 2 or 3 weeks of Oscar's life, Oscar spent the last 4 days of his life at the vet. Kiwi went in on her last day and went with Oscar. And she recognized Oscar right away, even with the smell. She wasn't turned off by the smell of death. But Thor had an interesting thing. Oscar was the dominant cat. Thor and Zeus have been beta males. Apollo, when he was around, was probably a beta. He was complex, but he was a beta. So was Shadow. So Oscar was always around beta males and Kiwi. And we had an older cat, female cat, Sassy, that he knew. And she was just an old cranky cat. But Thor, cat, there's the dominance show where the cat will grab the scruff of the other cat, get behind him, and start like he's looking to hump. But he's not. It's not a sexual thing. It's a dominance thing, where the one male cat especially does it to the other male. Now I think maybe one time Oscar tried to mount Kiwi. He used to mount Shadow. He doesn't. He tried once or twice to mount Zeus, but Zeus was a big wall and would just roll over and be like, "What the hell are you doing?" And I think one time he tried it to Apollo, and Apollo was like, "What the hell are you doing, Oscar?" So Thor idolized Oscar and would always let Oscar mount him. Then then Thor sometimes would do it as Oscar got older. Would sometimes try to mount Oscar, and Oscar didn't like it. Uh, I don't even know if Thor recognized that it was dominance play. He was, he was neutered as a kitten, so I don't think he even had sexual thoughts. But I noticed that in the last month or so, Thor let Oscar uh, do the dominance thing. Even though Thor, even though he was had a little bit of illness, was still he's still basically in his prime, whereas Oscar was more or less, had gone from 20, 22 pounds at his height down to, he died at 6 pounds. Kiwi died at 5 pounds, and she was about 10 or 11 at her height. But Thor let Oscar do the dominance thing, even though he could have easily shrugged him off. And I think at some level he knew Oscar was old, and this gave Oscar some kind of pleasure to do the dominance thing to him. And Bebe Thor was like, yeah, okay, whatever, if that makes you happy. And that's the kind of thing that you were talking about, noticing the arts. And philosophically, yes, Thor and Oscar didn't ratiocinate about this letting of Oscar play the dominant male, even though he was clearly over the hill and near death. But there's something about it. And getting back to the thing about an alien or an extraterrestrial having some kind of sense to see things that we don't. I mean, these animals like Kiwi and Thor, they get these little flashes of insight. And the thing is that human beings do get that, even greatly intelligent human beings, but they don't pick up on it. They don't massage it. They don't make it more than it is. And a lot of people become like, I've mentioned this woman that I was once involved with, who's now a new age religious scam artist. They do these things, and they prey on other people when they should be helping them. And I don't know. It's just odd. We have these abilities, and so few people use them.
You seem to notice a lot with animals too. I recall in one of your plays uh, you noticed a crow and a squirrel and their interaction together, and they were about to do battle. And the crow had this recognition. The squirrel was sort of oblivious to it,
Hmm.
and the crow just decided that because the squirrel is actually a fairly formidable foe, that he would deter and just go on with its thing. But in that moment, it was evaluating whether or not to attack the squirrel.
Yeah, and I think I also mentioned in a play how there were two birds. I don't know if they were crows that were either fighting in midair and descended right in front of my car as I was driving home, or they were looking to mate. And my car hit them. They fell to the road, and I could see in my rearview mirror a car that was 4 or 5 lengths behind me finish them off. And it was like but again, those are these little things. These little things happen. Yesterday, when I was at this humane society, I told Jessica about it. There was a cat. There were these two kittens. Uh, One was a beautiful Siamese, light brown with blue eyes. He was adopted by this girl right away. Well, I shouldn't say girl, young woman, maybe in her mid-20s, and she had her friend with her, or maybe they were lovers or whatnot. I don't know. They seemed a little odd. They said they had a few cats, and they went to this big cat who looked like Mango Moss, this big orange cat Don Moss used to have. But this cat hissed at him because I was in the section with kittens and older cats who were a bit had some issues. And then they ended up adopting this beautiful Siamese cat. Then, as I was leaving about an hour and a half later, the brother of this cat was this white cat who reminded me of Kiwi. This little kitten was black with some white markings and looked like it might have been a medium hair, or ended up a medium hair. And this cat name was Danny. And I mentioned that to the woman Charlotte, who was this woman Charlotte, who was at the center there. And then this Danny cat, this Italian woman, maybe late 30s, early 40s, had these two young kids, 10, 12 years old, a boy and a girl. And the boy's name was Danny. And they both gravitated to this Danny kid, so they adopted him. Those are the two cats that were adopted while I was there. And right there, cat named Danny. There's the boy named Danny. There's Danny. As I left, I said to them, remember, whatever you name this cat, remember he was always a dandy to start with, and that's a good name. So right there's a potential short story or a poem and
Yes.
you have to notice that. And this one cat that I mentioned named Dolce, I'd taken out and held her, but there was a green sign that I didn't bother reading, and I guess I wasn't supposed to take it out. But 2 days she snuggled up with me. So because I violated these rules, if she's still there today, I may want to. We may end up adopting her. Um, uh, and so there's all of these little. That, I was driving home from work. Yeah, I worked like 10 hours, and it was back busting. No one does anything when I'm off. I have to do so much shit. I unload these trucks. I do stuff for the night crew because they're either incompetent or they don't. The two young kids don't work. The boss of the store, his mother just recently died, so he's not there. So my boss, the grocery manager, is doing all this work. He's overworked. I'm overworked, and yet there are these moments that you see little things. I remember a couple of months ago, this woman who I had mentioned earlier in the year, who I worked with, who's really bitchy, and I had to file charges to get her to stop harassing me, and some other people who complained about her too. I found out that there was this ragged cat with a fucked up eye. Really, it looked like it was near death. And I had mentioned this to one of the other people, and this woman, who works there, who's generally nasty, mentioned that she had taken that cat to a vet to get it looked at. So here's this nasty woman who did something very nice and decent to an animal that wasn't hers. And so it gets to the point that you can't ever be 100% certain about everyone. And that doesn't mean she's a nice person overall. She's still nasty to other people. But she did have this apparent one moment where she spent some of her own money, probably a few $100 at minimum, to help this other creature. Another nasty woman I worked with at the store that fired me, I remember seeing she had a daughter who came at the store one day, and the daughter was very nice and well spoken. And when that nasty woman got fired, I felt bad because this daughter now was in economic jeopardy, if you will, because her mother was a piece of trash who probably couldn't get another job that paid that well, and is probably working at a gas station or something. And yet, so this is the thing. You can't. I try not to dismiss things. Jess is far more dismissive of people and things than I am. I again like to look at things in totality. She likes to jump to these quick conclusions. We were arguing because I wanted to go to the Humane Society and take her there, and today, and I said, let's get there when it opens at 11. Now it's past 11 now. It's about 11:35, so Jessica will get back from running soon. She'll take a shower, we'll eat, and then go. Because, I thought maybe if there's a cat that I like, I want to make sure that cat isn't gone. But Jessica, wants to do things her way, and we always end up doing things her way because I've learned it's not worth arguing about with it because she is what she is, and that's one of her negative aspects. She has far more positive aspects, but that's one of her negative aspects. And when we go out to eat and whatnot, we go 95% of the time where Jessica wants to go, and then the 5% of the time it'll be like as if that balances out. Well, we ate there this time. 3 weeks ago we ate at this place. We went to do what you wanted, 3 times a year. That should be enough, But that's just the way it is, and there's nothing you can do to change it. And I've learned enough to know that. So anyway, is there anything else then? A few things.
No, if you wanted to say anything else before we conclude that.
No, let's conclude here. So.